I went to public grade school and I went to private French school at high school. I went to school in French to begin with till grade 3, and then after grade 3 I asked my parents out of curiosity if I could switch over to English school, and they were super happy. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was not so easy to even get into English school back then. I think it must have been late 80s. I guess I was 9. Being older, you realize how much hardship was necessary for me to even be allowed to choose to go to English school. But that was done. I went to school in English and finished grades 4, 5, and 6. Then I did all my high school in French by choice again, and then by choice I went to Cégep in English. So I did pretty much as equal as possible, pretty much both. That wasn't the plan, but that's how it worked out.
I went to school across town to a Jewish elementary school. Actually, I went to a number of elementary schools, but one of them was Royalvale. Formerly, the school boards used to be divided into the Protestant school board and the Catholic school board. This was on the Protestant side, although it was an Anglophone Jewish school, which I never realized that growing up, because you just kind of assume everybody's Jewish. You don't really get the difference.
I went to a school called Dunray Gardens in TMR, and it's a public school, but it's a French immersion school. My parents wanted me to go there because you do the first 3 years entirely in French, and then the last 3 years are half the day in French, half the day in English. And they felt that it would be the best way for me to get really a base in both languages. And it was, but it meant that all my friends were Anglophones, and I just think that the language that you speak with your friends is really the language that you're going to become more fluent in. But I definitely have a strong base in both languages, the grammar and the vocabulary and stuff like that.
No, preschool was in Saint-Agathe, and grade 1 was in Val-David. After that, I homeschooled. The only thing I remember is finding the material very, very basic and quite dumb. Besides not having very much ability to write back then, I was a very good reader, and instead of reading comic books, I would always read encyclopedias.
For elementary school, I went to Roslyn, which is in Westmount as well, but again, I was in the French stream of the French immersion. It was actually a bit of not an issue, but it was a decision to be made when I was younger, because my grandmother had been very involved in the founding of the Priory School, which is a private school, elementary school in Westmount. And so my father wanted me to go there because of her, but my mother sort of won that battle in wanting me to go to public school for my elementary. And then she had always loved ECS so much because it was really sort of progressive, I think, when she was teaching there. So that was the idea, was that this, an all-girls private school education was what she wanted for me, so.
Mon école primaire était juste à côté de la maison où je restais. Donc, c'était une école alternative. C'était une école qui avait une nouvelle façon de fonctionner à l'époque, pas dans les années.
My mom fought to get me into an English public school because there was a great deal of pressure to force assimilate non-Francophone children into the Francophone system. It was ugly. It was really, really ugly. The literature was, especially the history books, were off completely. That was frustrating, especially, and I understood that it was the 70s. But when you see a book and it has captions of like les sauvages indiens attaquent les nobles français, it's like, my mom saw that and she flipped when I brought that home the first day, and she had the book banned.
In terms of the experience in the public school, the French portion, I'd say everybody was pretty much the same. Everybody was French. I was the only person who spoke English. Pretty much everybody was more or less the same. Very Tremblay and Morin and, les noms québécois. Well, honestly, being the only one with a name like McDermott that wasn't super French and super Québécois, when I grew up, obviously I was cast apart a little bit. It wasn't as obvious as being like Asian or African or something like that, because I still looked like most people. I'm a white guy, looks like everybody else. I remember, not myself, but mostly my brother got picked on a lot. I think I didn't get bullied much because I picked up on him being bullied, and I guess I adapted to that so that it wouldn't happen to me, but still he got picked on, he was set apart, and I guess it wasn't easy for him to deal with it, but that wasn't, it wasn't all because of that, but mostly because, like, first of all, you know, as kids, as soon as somebody's a little bit different, of course they're going to get picked on. I picked up a character trait from my dad, which is always trying to do whatever you want to do regardless of what people are saying or doing, because I got the impression whenever he was with other people of his age group, he was always different and always treated differently, always put on the spot, and always you would hear things like, oh, well, for sure you think that way and you think this way, because he was like identified as being different. So I could see how he acted towards that. He was always always super confident about what he was saying regardless if he was on the spot or not, and I guess I picked that up from him. I wouldn't say I was persecuted myself, but definitely I did feel very different growing up, and always felt like, one, I had something to prove, and two, weirdly, I had nothing to prove at the same time. Kind of, you know, it was contradicting itself. Like, I had to be different because I was different, but I also had to be the same because I didn't feel like I was different.
À cette école-là, j'ai pas beaucoup de souvenirs d'avoir eu ni de noirs, ni d'anglophones, ni d'autres ethnies particulièrement. Je me souviens, j'en ai vraiment pas de souvenirs. En tout cas, dans ma classe proche de moi, je me souviens pas du tout. S'il y en avait vraiment pas beaucoup. Les amis que je retrouve de cette école-là sont francophones, québécois, de souche.
Mostly getting up in the morning and going to school was about not being bullied more than learning. So I was like, that's why my parents pulled me out of school. And I started getting an appetite to learn again. So I understand very scientifically now why they would do that in a psychological way. But back then it was like, I didn't understand why they would pick on a minority. I was quite different back then. I had long curly hair, and I was walking around looking at the floor a lot, very up in my head, space cadet.
I got my ass handed to me every day. My mother got tired of me coming home with bruises and went to Bancroft and said, you know, my kid's being beaten up. And they said, so? And my mom was a Mohawk woman. You don't just say so to a Mohawk woman. She ended up starting a class at Bancroft Elementary, an art class, and teaching kids about natives. And after that, it got a little better. Unfortunately, my mom didn't come with me to high school.
Went to high school at École Internationale de Montréal, which is a francophone high school. It's in Westmount, but it's a francophone public high school. Yeah. It was strange. In primary school, I was the francophone kid, and then in high school, I was the anglophone kid. I don't know how I always managed to be on this sort of margins of whatever was like the mainstream, but in primary school, most of the kids were anglophone learning French. I already spoke French, which was great. I, got 10 on 10 all my dictée in grade 1 and stuff like that. But then all my friends were English, so by the time I got to high school, I kept some of the same friends, and I was in high school with one of my best friends from primary school, and we spoke English together. And so we were definitely at odds with the rest of the francophone population there. We were like, les Anglos, and we were not embraced.
I went to Westmount High. There was an Italian kid at the school who called me a kike at one point. When it eventually came to very few blows, because fights get broken up pretty quickly, and we wound up speaking with the vice principal, he accused me of calling him a wop. I didn't know what a wop was at the time and had to ask later. It kind of got me off the hook, though.
I went to Outremont High School, and Outremont High School was English, also good 95% Greek. Because of that, I hated Greeks for the longest time. And it wasn't because they were Greeks, it was just because they were children and they didn't know better, and their parents didn't teach them properly.
Il n'y avait pas de confrontation à ce niveau-là à mon école, vu qu'on n'y était pas confronté. Il y avait un noir à mon école secondaire, donc c'était plutôt lui qui était en minorité et pas le contraire, ce qui fait que...
I went to a private school in Montreal, and I moved at the same time. It was in my opinion, very much for people who couldn't speak even English and would have to come here and go to school. And so by getting away by some of the Quebec laws of speaking French and English, they could be a private school and be slightly more slack on some things. So their program was, to help people pass everything, really, essentially. And there was a lot of Asian students who had trouble in English and French, didn't speak any French at all, and didn't speak English very well either.
There was some of that sort of after school in the school bus or waiting, not the school bus, just the city bus, waiting for the bus. I remember at one point some guys yelling like, maudit Anglo and that kind of stuff, but people are picking on each other all the time in high school about everything, and I just don't think that I was ever picked on about being an Anglo more than anyone was picked on about, being like nerdy or having long hair or being, gay or whatever. So, but my friends who were Anglo were much more upset by it than I was. It's true. My best friends in high school were really upset by those comments. It rolled off me though. I didn't feel more Anglo than Francophone. I just didn't really take it personally. It was really multicultural, and actually we felt a lot more persecution from the teachers and the principals than from the other students. The other students were really open. It was really multicultural. They were willing to accept people from all over the world, but the teachers were really uptight about people speaking English in the hallways, and the director was a very nationalist Quebecois, so he really was not okay with the English in the hallways.
Maybe you shouldn't wear native t-shirts or stuff like that, or maybe you should not be so native. That was one teacher's response to me.
I did get picked on a lot in school, but not usually for reasons of culture clash. I don't think I met a lot of French people my own age when I was in high school, or even elementary. There was very, very little mixing there. I had a few neighbors who were French. We got along really well.
When I went to English school, it didn't take very long for me to get assimilated because I was lucky enough that at the same time as me in the same class in grade 4, there was a new kid as well that was there, and he was French, but he was like super French, like hardly any English whatsoever. And so all the attention got diverted over to him, so I was able to just, glide in under the radar, so to speak. And also I was pretty good in sports and I was good in school, so I kind of melted in very easily. And I don't really remember being bullied at all for being different whatsoever. Like over there, a lot of the kids I was surprised to find out were just as French as I was and also had like English parents. So I felt actually more at home there because everybody had this extra being English, and some of them also had like a third language.
Drummond was an elementary English school, and Nutrimont was the high school. And we were the only two English schools in that area, and the rest were just French. And we were surrounded by French kids. And they would come and try shit all the time. Their toughies would come over to our school and stir up shit and go, oh, maudit anglais, maudit anglais, maudit anglais, and we would yell back, maudit québécois, maudit québécois, maudit québécois. And we just, and that was the only time that they really didn't bother me, was when the French kids would come around because, hey, we have a new enemy to fight, so we're all united now, right? And they would look at me, and I'm just like,